So welcome everybody to this new session of the seminar course. Today is the penultimate session of the seminar course. So we still have another one in a couple of months. But today we are very pleased to have with us Dr. Damien André. Damien is, the research activities of Damien are focused mainly in numerical methods for applied mechanics dedicated to brittle materials. He has been developing numerical methods, algorithms, and models within the discrete element method framework in order to improve the understanding and the prediction of the microstructure and macroscopic properties relationships of ceramics. Damien André is currently associate professor at the Limoges University and at the Ceramic Research Institute. Damien, you can start when you want.
Okay, thank you, Ignacy, for this presentation. I'm very glad to make this seminary. So I would like to introduce the title. This is a discrete element model compatible with continuum mechanic constitutive law. And this presentation, a part of this work has been achieved at the CIMNE during a 3 months stay period. So maybe you know me physically. Okay. So let's start. So this work was made with the collaboration of Miguel Angel, so from the CIMNE, and also other colleagues, Jérémy Girardot and Cédric Hubert, which are French colleagues. Okay, let's go. So just a few words about myself. So I am associate professor since this 2014. I am currently at the IRCER laboratory, which is a laboratory dedicated to ceramics. I am also associate professor at the engineering school named NC in the ceramic department. And here you have a picture of a picture of the building where I work, and this is located in the center of France, in the city called Limoges. So maybe you know Limoges for its famous porcelain. Okay, so now I would like to introduce the lab. So the IRCER laboratory is a huge lab dedicated to ceramic material. So there is 200 people, including 100 of permanent people. So there is here you got the number. I don't want to say it all the number. So just this number, maybe about 100 of PhD students, postdoctoral fellows, and non-permanent engineers. All the IRCER laboratory is cut off in 4 different axes. The first axis is dedicated to ceramic processes. The second axis is dedicated to plasma and laser processes. The third axis is dedicated to multi-scale and structural organization of materials. And the fourth axis is about the ceramic under environmental stresses. Okay, and all these axes treat from nanoscale to engineering scale the ceramic material, and also from processing, so how to process ceramics, to the final application. But I will talk about this point later. So myself, I am inside this axis, the fourth axis. Okay, right now, next. So since this date, I conduct mainly researches on thermomechanical modeling of refractories. So here you have some nice picture of refractories which are submitted very high temperature. And most of my them is related to discrete element modeling with a software which is named Granu. And I also enjoy a lot of numerical developments as OpenMeca, PyDIC. This is other software that I enjoy to develop. Okay, so now let's move. Okay. Just I would like to introduce the discrete element method. I know that there is some guy who are very familiar with this method, but maybe not all of us. So I will very briefly introduce the discrete element method. So the discrete element method was made for simulated granular media. So here you have some nice picture of some granular media, such as rocks, which are hair, but there is also some the cornflakes or some kind of granular material. Of course, the sound, and you get also the powder. So as you can see, granular material are everywhere and at every scales. Okay, so now how to consider this granular media? As you can see, in some cases, granular media have the behavior of solid, because we can walk on the sand, we can make some nice sculpture with sand, but also it gets the behavior of liquid, because the sand can flow like that. And in some in some during some we don't know for some condition you get a sudden state changes, because as you can see with avalanche, the sand is like a solid, and it for some reasons it flows, so you get some sudden state changes, and it's quite complicated to predict such a sudden state changes. So I would like to show another illustration of the behavior of such material. So here, this is an experiment of the avalanche. So here, the balls are locked, and we have to push to hit the experimental apparatus to unlock the balls and to make them flow. So this is an illustration of the avalanche with the granular media. And this stop and go phenomenon is mainly explained by the presence of what we call the chain force inside this granular media. Okay, so now this is the end of the experiment. So I would like to show you a very nice video made by some colleague of the Duke University. So this is a granular media, cylindrical. So this is a disc. This is not balls. This is disc. And as you can see, this light, this is the chain force, which are regulated by photoelasticity. And here, this is a ball, which well, we can see. Okay, and the ball, we will push out, and we will see a modification in the chain force. I think it's a very nice experiment. And here, as you can see, there is a modification in the chain force, and it's obvious to say that these chain force are not continuous. This is not like pressure or stress. Okay. So this phenomenon, so I talk about the chain force, are very hard to simulate with classical continuous mechanics based approach such as FEM. So that's why the DEM was initiated at the beginning of the 80s in order to simulate the granular media. And here, I think you get a citation of the main idea of DEM. And Kundal says in this very important paper for the DEM community, that a granular medium is composed of distinct particles which displace independently from one another and interact only at contact points, and the discrete character of the medium results in a complex behavior under conditions of loading and unloading, and to date, no satisfactory constitutive relationships have been established. So the main idea of DEM is to work, in fact, at the scale of the grain of or the particle. Okay, so just few words about how it works. So here you get some simulation of DEM method. So here you have some grains, and the grains are checked inside a moving parallelepiped, and it allows us to create some waves inside granular waves inside with this granular media. So the idea of the discrete element method is very simple. So we consider that a discrete element is a rigid body, and we called that a grains, and discrete elements are in interaction through simply contacts, and force displacement law are introduced in this contact law. And something very important, this method was directly inspired from the molecular dynamics, in fact. So here you have the main algorithm of the discrete element method. So at the beginning, so this is an iterative method which needs very small time steps, and of course you get the initial state. So at the initial state, we consider the position of all the grains, the initial velocity, initial acceleration, and so on. The first step is to collect all the force and the torques that act on the grains or the discrete elements. After that, we apply the Newton's second laws to deduce, in fact, the acceleration from the force and the torques that act on this on the discrete element. After this step, we have to integrate acceleration. So a first integration to deduce the velocity at the next step, and a second integration to deduce the position at the next step also. And after that, we have to correct some displacement to apply, in fact, what we call the boundary condition. For example, we want to have a rigid wall, so some grains have to be fixed, and or we can apply a velocity, and some grains have to move in a given direction. So this is what we call applied direction. So this loop, this is a time loop, and this time loop have to be played 10,000 times, 100,000 times. It depends. And maybe to finish about the discrete element method. As you know, DEM use an explicit time schemes, so it requires very, very small time steps, and maybe this is the main limitation of this method, because we are not able to simulate a long time or quasi-static phenomenon. Okay, and another comment is about these steps. These steps, in fact, about collecting force and torques, is maybe the most computational is the most computational time, because we spend about 90% of computational time inside this step, because here you have to make what we call the contact detection, and contact detection involves some geometrical algorithm, and it's quite complex, and it's a quite long algorithm. So there is some trick to speed up this step, but at this time there is no satisfactory algorithm to get some increasing of this contact detection algorithm. So now I would like to. So here, this is a discrete element method to simulate granular media. Now, I would like to move on another part, which is about using a discrete element method, but to simulate quite a continuum media, such as ceramics. So I will talk about this point now. So the purpose of this, to use discrete element method for ceramics, for example, is to model the failure of brittle media. Because as you know, there is no, at this time, using a finite element method to simulate a lot of fracture inside and propagation of fracture and initiation of fracture inside a brittle media is not so obvious. So we can use the discrete element method to try to simulate this quite complex phenomena. So here I got an example of an experiment which is called the wedge pitting test. So here you get you have a block of ceramics. This is a refractory, typical refractory, and the wedge here is moving down to open up the sample and to make a controlled fracture experiment. So this is a method to measure the tenacity of ceramic material. So how to model this experiment with DEM? So the idea is quite simple. In fact, it comes from the lattice element model, which is named LEM, which is quite a very old idea, in fact. And we can combine LEM and DEM through the so-called bonded particle method. And the bonded particle method, the idea is quite simple. We got material points which are surrounded by spheres. In fact, this is the discrete elements, which are mainly spherical, but we can use other geometry. We will see that after. And these material points are linked through a very simple rheological mechanical model. And all these material points form a lattice network, as you can see on this picture. So here this is the real experiment, and here this is the model, the discrete element model, where you can see some discrete elements which are linked by what we call bond, and this bond are some rheological mechanical interaction between discrete elements. So with this kind of trick, in fact, we can simulate a kind of continuous material only with a discrete description. Okay, sorry. So the main interest, in fact, is to introduce local fracture criteria inside this bond. And what we can see in this, and this is what we do in this video. So here you can see the propagation of fracture, and here the displacement are magnified. And as you can see, we can obtain the initiation and the propagation of fracture. And these failure criteria are quite simple. Generally, they are based on local stresses or less generally on strains. Okay. But the main problem with this approach is what we have to put inside the local property. The local property for me are the property of the discrete element and the bond between the discrete element. So there is a problem. The input parameter of a DEM model are set at the local scale. So for example, you set the mechanical property of this bond, and this mechanical property are not known. In fact, we don't know what we have to put inside this bond. And this is the main problem, in fact, with the standard discrete element method for granular media. In fact, we don't know what to put inside the contact law to get some to get this contact law and to get the right value of this contact law. We have to make some inverse problems, and we have to involve a lot of experiment, observe the experimental result, try some local property, and make a kind of iteration to converge around towards the right solution. So it's not so comfortable for users. And this problem, I think, is a very common problem with DEM and the lattice element method. So just an example to illustrate this difference between local properties and apparent properties. So here I implement a perfect plastic interaction between two discrete elements. So as you can see, we get a plastic hair answer. Okay, this is just a strain and stresses curve. And now we will form a lattice networks of this with this bond, and we obtain the pink curve. And as you can see, the pink curve and the orange curve are not the same. And we get some a smooth effect and so on. So this is what so this is an illustration of what of the difference between local properties and apparent properties. So mainly discrete element users have to adjust their local properties to match given apparent properties of their numerical material, in fact. Okay, so I finish about this point. Oh, I think I'm quite I'm not late. So now now we move on the third part about the modeling of elastic behavior with the what we called the distinct lattice spring model. So I will introduce this distinct lattice spring model in this part. So this model was proposed in about this date, and the idea is to have a direct model of brittle elastic media, which are defined only by three parameters: the Young's modulus, the Poisson's ratio, and a failure stress. So this model does not take into account the rotations and works only for spherical elements and regular arrangement. As you can see here, for example. And this kind of geometry is not really compatible with our discrete element method. And now I will show some adaptation of this method to adapt this method to the standard discrete element method. Okay. So how it works for the DLSM method. So the first point is to apply a void hypothesis. So the void hypothesis is simply an hypothesis about the displacement fields. So we consider that locally we have a linear displacement fields, not quadratic, and not so the most simple linear displacement field that we can describe mathematically. So here you get a description of the displacement field of a point in the 3D space. So this is only a linear combination of the three space variables, which are x, y, and z. And we can also write this with a vectorial in a vectorial form. So the main idea is how to compute these variables from a point cloud. And as you can see here, we want to compute the A, B, C variable for this point, taking into account this point, this point, this point, and all the neighbor, in fact, all the neighbors of this point OI. Okay. So considering this point and considering the displacement of its n neighbor, ABC can be determined in 3 ways. If the number of neighbor is less than 3, in fact, because we have three unknowns, so the system is underdetermined and we don't have any solutions. So as you can expect now, if the number of neighbors is 3, so here we get 3 neighbors that surrounded the central point, the system can be solved exactly by a linear system. And if n is more than 3, the system is overdetermined, and the solution could be approximated thanks to a least square method. And this is, I think, the main idea of this DLSM method. So now we are able, if we know the displacement of the neighbor, we are able to compute a kind of local displacement field of a central point. And now from this local displacement field, it's quite obvious to compute a strain tensor because it's given simply by this well-known formula. And here, the displacement field is simply what we have computed at the step before with the least square method or with a perfect, or if n equal to 3, there is a perfect solution. So finally, the strain tensor at the central point can be deduced from A, B, and C from this following formula. So it's quite simple. We just apply the gradient on the displacement fields. And in most of cases, with a discrete element method in 3D, not in 2D, but in 3D, the number of neighbors that surrounded a central discrete element is more than 3. So all these unknown A, B, C are approximated thanks to moving least square method. So here I insist on this term. This is moving because we apply this method on all the discrete elements. So we have a kind of moving least square method on all the discrete domains. Okay. So now we are able to compute some the strains of a point cloud. So now we have to compute a reaction force to be compatible with a discrete element method, because inside the discrete element method, everything is force and torques. There is no description of a strain or stress. So how to do that? The first thing is to make a kind of Voronoi tessellation inside our point cloud to get these important things, which is the surface interaction between 2 point clouds. So we can say that a Voronoi cell, in fact, is a discrete element. So we use a Voronoi tessellation. So we are able to compute the surface of the contact surface between 2 Voronoi cells. We are able also to compute the normal to this Voronoi cell. So we are able to compute the force like that, which is simply the surface multiplied by the stress tensor in the center of the surface and dot the normal to the surface. And so now, how to compute this stress tensor? It's quite simple. In fact, we just apply the Hooke's law in 3D. So as we are able to compute the strain tensor, so it's quite obvious to compute the stress tensors, taking into account the Young's modulus and the Poisson's ratio of the material. So a quite interesting and important trick, as we want to compute the force at the interface, we simply take the mean, the average value between the strengths between the two neighbors to deduce the strain at the interface. I hope that I'm clear. Sorry if it's not so clear. Okay. So now we are able to have a stress tensor at the interface. Okay. So just a few words about how to build a discrete domain that are compatible with such approach. So what we do in GRANU, but there is, I think, a lot of things to manage this stuff. So we use what we call the compaction algorithm, which is named Cooker. So here, this is simple, a way to get some compact domain with spherical discrete element. And from this compacted domain, we apply simply a Voronoi tessellation thanks to the very simple and accurate Voro++ library. So now we are able to have some Voronoi domain which are compatible with DLSM method. Okay. I would like to talk about some tests. So we will see how to introduce that. So to test the DLSM model, I make this benchmark. So this benchmark is simply an elastic ball, as you can see, which rebounding and bouncing on an inclined plane. And this very simple test is very challenging, in fact, because as you can see, it involves high displacement of this ball. It involves rigid body rotation. It involves contact friction when there is a collision between the elastic ball and the perfect plane. And we got some high deformations at the contact interface. So it's a very simple test, but it's quite really challenging to obtain good qualitative good results. So let's go to see some video of this test. So this is my first try, and as you can see, it's not very it's not very good. So what we miss here, it doesn't work because the strains in this case are non-local. What does I mean? It means that it's important to compute the displacement field, the original displacement field, in the local frames of the discrete element. If we don't do that, of course, we are not able to manage high displacement and high rotation. So this is an important thing to do. And this feature was not present in the original DLSM method. So now we can have another try. And as you can see, it don't work as, as expected. So what we miss, in fact, the displacement are non-local. Oh no, sorry. Sorry. No. No. I made a mistake. I was too fast. No, the first thing is very important. In fact, here we compute the strain at the interface only by taking the mean between the two neighboring point cloud. And this is not really accurate because, in fact, we can deduce directly from this from the displacement of these 2 points one component of this strain tensor. And if we force this component to be equal to this right value, we are more accurate and we are more local, in fact. So that's what we do. Now the second thing is to use a local frame to have a local description to our displacement field. So this is the second trial. So now I move on another try. So it's quite better, but it don't works. So maybe I replay the video just to see. And as you can see, in fact, the Voronoi grains are not rotated. And this is and in fact, this is a problem. So it fails again because it lacks of rotation. So here you get the explanation of this problem, because with the original DLSM method, we have sphere. So with sphere, there is no problem of rotation. But if we use polyhedron, which are Voronoi cell, it's a problem. We need to take into account this rotation. So now we introduce the rotation capability in this method. So let's try again. So here again, it fails. Okay. So what we need to put, in fact, is a quite of rotational rigidity between the Voronoi cell. And here, this is not many satisfactory, but we use this formula and to transfer some rotational torques between the Voronoi cells, which are discrete elements. And we can consider that this factor is a kind of internal length of this model. So now another try. So it started very good, but as you can see, there is again a problem. So we need, I think, a last ingredient, which is a small damping factor, because in fact, this scheme is not strictly energy conservative, and I choose to introduce a small numerical damping factor in the velocity Verlet schemes. So the initial velocity Verlet schemes is a centered integration schemes. So in fact, this is a decentered now integration schemes, and it introduces a kind of very small numerical factor, a very small damping factor, and it is able now to stabilize the simulation, as you can see here. And here it works, I have to say. I play the video just to the end because okay, so as you can see, it's a very simple test, but a very challenging one, because we need a lot of things to make this test work. So now, so just to conclude, to let it work, we need a local deformation, we need local displacement, we need a rotation and rotational rigidity, and we need a small damping factor. And all these three features are quite new to compare it to the original DLSM method. And I recall the main interest of this method is to introduce directly the material parameter of your simulation without make any calibration study. So now I will talk about what I did during my stay at the SIMNE laboratory, is to, in fact, to make a coupling between the GRANU software, where this method was implemented, and the Kratos multiphysics software. And I will introduce that now. So this is an idea of Miguel Angel, and he said if we are able to compute local strain tensor, why not using the Kratos, in fact, constitutive laws, which are able in the finite element package for computing stress. So here, so let's go, let's try. So here you have the main algorithm of this, the main discrete element algorithm, and here you have the dialogue between the Kratos package and the Granu software. So we send simply to the Kratos multiphysics the strain tensor, and we apply these routines, so the calculate material response Cauchy, and it gives a stress tensor, and we treat the stress tensor inside the Granu part and to produce the right reaction force. And now I propose to show to you some tests, some tests with this architecture. Okay, so let's try with elastic, orthotropic, plastic, and quasi-brittle material. Okay. So a first test that we do is to use very simple uniaxial tensile test on quite what we call the gradiented mesh. So here, this is you can see the mesh. So the mesh has a non-uniform distribution. So the mesh is smaller, in fact, at the center of the sample, and it's so we would like to test this feature just to know if this method is able to deal with different size of meshes, and that's quite very new to study these kind of things. And here, just to introduce to you, we put as input parameters a Young's modulus and a Poisson's ratio of 5 gigapascal and a Poisson's ratio of 0.2, and we get at the apparent scales the more or less the same value. So it's quite it's a very good result. I'm quite happy of this result. So now the idea is to test something more complicated. Oh, sorry, I don't know why. Ah, okay. So here, this is a qualitative study. So you got a plate here with a central hole, and this is only a tensile test like that on this sample. And here, as you can see, this is the stress. You get a stress concentration around the hole. And here, this is the analytical Kirsch solutions, and here, this is our simulations. And as you can see, it gives quite similar results. So it seems to be very to be accurate. So we get some main differences, or just very near the hole. So maybe we are not very good. Just near the boundary condition. In fact, the free boundary condition. So another test now is to test orthotropic elastic material. So this is a very open problem with discrete element method. At this time, I don't see any satisfactory way to deal with orthotropic elastic material. And here we use simply the generic anisotropic 3D laws of the Kratos package. And as you can see here, we put 5, 3, and 1 gigapascal on the Young's modulus on the y-axis, on the x-axis, y-axis, and z-axis, and we get this apparent value, which are very close of what we put inside as input parameters of our simulation. So it's a good result. And we test the same thing with the Poisson's ratio, in fact. So here you have the input parameter of our simulation, and here you get you can see the apparent parameter. So we are not so. There is a small differences with the Poisson's ratio. To be honest, I don't know why at at this stage, we have to maybe to work on this topic. As you can see, there is a small differences here, and of course, these differences is go down when the value of the Poisson ratio is going down also. But proportionally, I think this is the same value. Okay, so it's not so bad with the Poisson ratio with orthotropic elastic material. Now, another test case is about plasticity. So I'm not a specialist of plasticity, so quite. I know that there is very people familiar with plasticity. So I made very simple test case. So here we test this sample with 2,000 of discrete elements, 5,000 of discrete elements, 10,000, 50,000, and 20,000, just to test if the plasticity is sensitive to the mesh size. And as you can see, this is not the case. So here we introduce a perfect plastic material with this Kratos constitutive law, and we get this apparent answer because this sample were simply submitted to tensile tests. So it's quite good results. So again, here you get the input parameters. So here we introduce only yield strength, and we obtain this yield strength. So it's quite the results looks good for me. Okay, so now just a qualitative test. Sorry for that. So we do the same thing. So we test the plasticity with a plate with a central hole, and we get this plastic band, which are oriented at 45 degrees. So it's quite in line with the theory. And the last things is about the quasi-brittle material. So we introduce, in fact, damage modeling inside the material. And here we put a yield strength and we put a fracture energy, and we get this answer, which is quite in line with what we would like to expect. Just the post-peak behavior is quite different. I don't know if it is significant or not, depending of the number of discrete elements inside our sample. And we do a last things. So this is a 3-point bending test, just to test if we get a crack pass, which go to the right on this central point. Okay, so I think I have finished. So now the conclusion. So this study proposed an improved version of the DLSM model that takes into account rotation, that proposes a numerical trick for stabilizing the numerical scheme, and the proposed model is able to deal with constitutive laws. So we test quasi-static, we test some elastic material, we test plasticity, orthotropic material, and quasi-brittle material. It seems to support also the mesh refinement, and I think that this is not very sensitive to the mesh size, but now it's not so that it's not so clear. So I think now we have to try some more challenging tests with the coupling between Kratos and GRANU, and so now I am ready for open question. Thank you for your attention. You can. If you have
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Andre. Very nice presentation. We have 5 minutes maybe or so for questions. If anybody is interested in asking, just okay. Alejandro, yeah, go ahead, please.
Hello, good morning. Congratulations for the good results. They're really well. I like them a lot. Well, I'm one of the main developers of the constitutive laws that you have been using in Kratos. especially the orthotropic and plasticity damage and so on. I remember that Miguel Angel asked me at some point about this. Now I see the results. I'm happy to hear that they were useful.
Okay.
And well, it's not really a question. It's more like a comment. Do you have any complaint about the constitutive laws, or do you have any feedback for me that it may be useful to improve them, or to, I don't know.
Oh,
there is room for improvement. I just want a little bit of feedback, and that's it.
no, to be honest, at the really beginning, it was very hard to take in hand this new package, but because I have no knowledge about how Kratos works, but no, now it's quite clear. I have no. You talk about maybe some bugs or something like that?
No, I mean, so maybe you found some inconsistencies or something like that, but if not, I mean, I'm gonna be happy,
No, sorry. I don't see anything strange for me. I made a lot of mistake, but this is what at the beginning, but it was my fault, in fact.
And actually, the plasticity and damage that you're using, they are normalizing the factor energy available over the finite element size.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, this is one way of, let's say, normalizing for the different meshes that you're using. It is not perfect. I think that those differences they can be expected somehow. The ones that you're experiencing in the last example, I think. I would expect that with the FEM, but maybe I'm wrong. But well.
Yeah, I don't talk about this point because I'm not really mastering this point, but I put an internal lens depending of the Voronoi size.
Yeah, no, that should be fine. I mean, according to the size of the element,
of the Voronoi element.
That's a very good question and comment, Alejandro. Thank you, because I also had a question regarding this Voronoi size, and it's related to what Alejandro said. I think, well, I'm pretty sure that the mesh dependency, little mesh dependency that may be seen in this example that you're showing, may be related to this internal length or this Voronoi size. And my question is, or maybe, I don't know if it's a comment, or have you tried changing the Voronoi size and see if the mesh dependency vanishes or remains? So, I mean, how do you know which is the radius of interaction between one particle and the others, or the Voronoi size?
Yes. What is your question, Ignacy?
So
sorry.
How do you determine the radius of interaction of one particle with the other? So, I mean, and the end it's the Voronoi side. How do you determine this size of the Voronoi cell?
This is mainly the. So in fact, we have to move, but I don't know. Maybe I'm afraid to be out of topic. At the beginning here at the beginning of the process to build the discrete domain, in fact, at this stage we know the distance between two discrete elements are known. So we got a kind of internal length, in fact.
So the internal length is determined by the size of the particles and the packing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because
that's something important to check when you are using this method to estimate the let's say the force and displacement curve in a quasi-brittle failure test, right? I think this may have a relationship with that little mesh dependency. I'm guessing this is the goal.
And also, it's something that it may be concerning. If you come back to the plot of force displacement at the very end, I'm sorry that this one, yeah, exactly. I would expect that the more elements that you have, the more ductile somehow it will behave. I would expect that, but in here it's not fully satisfied.
Yeah,
it's different, right? So it seems that there is something not fully consistent with the whole. I mean, it's obviously not really bad, but I think there is some detail You know, the devil is always there, and it's not fully consistent. Maybe it's what Ignacy says, that the estimation of this characteristic length. Well, I don't know, but
Yeah.
I would expect the 20K elements to be the more ductile, for example.
Yeah, me too. But there is no order, in fact.
I mean, I suggest, I don't know, it's just a curiosity, but I suggest that you could try different internal length scales with the same number of elements. I mean, at the end, these 20K elements are
Yeah.
Voronoi cells.
Yes, you're right.
But this
Yeah, you mean the same discretization, but with twice and 10 times the whole size, right?
Exactly. Just to see what's the behavior,
Yeah,
how it looks
like the size effect or something like that.
Exactly. Just like a sensitive analysis of the length, of the internal length. I would try.
Okay.
Because this, just one last question, these 20K elements that you show here, it's 20K spherical particles or Voronoi cells?
This is the same number. For each spherical particles, it gives, after the Voronoi tessellation, one Voronoi cell.
Okay, I understand. Yeah.
And the center are the same.
Okay.
Between the sphere centers and the center, what we call center of Voronoi cell.
Because maybe, I don't know. Yeah, the Voronoi cell is built up with one particle and the surrounding ones. I don't know if you can create a Voronoi cell of, let's say, 2 layers. I don't know if that's possible.
Ooh.
In order to change the internal length, I would say.
Yeah, I understand.
I don't know. I don't know. This is something I was thinking because I worked with non-local damage models some time ago, and there you had to put an internal length. And depending on that internal length, you manage to, let's say, stabilize your results and banish the mesh dependency.
Okay.
So, I don't know. I think that this is something related to this internal size, but it's something to further study. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Andre. Really interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Andre and Alejandro. Is there any other question? Short question, comment? If there are no more questions, then we can close the session here. Thank you again, Andre, for this nice presentation and this seminar.
Thank you.
And thank you all for coming to this session. I'll see you in the next session of the Siminar Seminar course. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.